The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Big Man Haslar presiding. Aye, for the Honourable Judge Haslar. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we're in the case of The People versus The Longest Goodnight, a 1996 action thriller.
Wait a minute. Listen, you have had now, what, 3-4 members of the Cinemania Society on as guests, and you haven't had me? That is completely unacceptable, especially when you're covering one of my favorite movies of the 90s, at least in the action genre, specifically with female leads, starring Gina Davis. But before we get into all of that, you guys have heard a lot of rubbish about the Cinemania Society. All right, there's a lot of rumors going around. We have been blacklisted, exiled, excommunicated, and you need to know the truth. So I'm going to tell you how it really went down.
Going to allow this.
Okay, there I was on a transatlantic flight to get back to the beautiful green hills of my homeland, New Jersey, when a rogue blast of industrial waste knocked the plane off course. Everyone tells me it was a random accident and that I'm paranoid. So the plane is starting to go into a nosedive, right? Folks are screaming, the air stewards are flailing, even the kids are pausing their Switch games, but my training kicks in. In moments of crisis, my blood turns to ice water. No, seriously, like literal transmutation. So I jump into the middle aisle when...
What are you doing?
I'm chalking out a circle to summon a wind spirit that can right the ship.
No, you're not. You've got it all wrong. The rune in the 11th hour is backward.
That's a McDonald's wrapper. And you are entirely too calm.
I must maintain composure at all times to stave off Cinemania.
Cinemania? Wait, does that mean?
It does.
And you are?
I am. And therefore we are...
about to die! Because the plane was just coming apart at the seams. There wasn't a moment to lose. I finished the circle. That's not a wind spirit.
No, I'm British.
Told you your circle was wrong.
Where am I? And why are all these Americans screaming? It's very rude.
You're on a plane, and we're crashing.
Well, that'll teach you not to show up for British Airways, or even Aer Lingus. At least the screaming will stop soon. Has anyone got a toffee?
But Andy couldn't cross the power of the magic circle I'd drawn. Ow! The hell! And there was no time to send him back. We quickly grabbed up as many of those free blankets they hand out as we could and sewed them into a makeshift parachute.
Safety pins.
What?
We used safety pins. We didn't sew it.
Hey, who's telling this story?
Who even travels around with a sewing kit? It makes no sense. If you don't tell it right, you're going to give us all continuity errors.
No! Fine, Jesus. Parachute in hand, we were sucked out of the plane. We landed deep in the wilderness. I didn't know where, but it certainly wasn't the life-sustaining paradise of the Garden State.
Oh, morons, I'm still here. But I'm also back home in merry old England. Look, right there I can see my tea set, my Union Jack bedspread, and I hear the BBC on. Okay, listen, I did not say merry old England, and I don't actually have any of that stuff. I drink whiskey out of a mug like a proper gentleman.
Fine, jeez. Everyone's an editor. Andy was still effectively summoned, but the circle itself was lost, along with whatever bit of the plane I'd drawn it on. So Andy's been kind of trapped in limbo of both California with us and back home in Manchester ever since. It was hell during tax season. So there we were, lost and starving. For days, we lived off of berries and acorns and Del Taco dumpster scraps.
Speak for yourself.
The only thing that saved us was coming upon a little cabin in the woods. Inquisitor Ethan took it upon himself to lead the way. Who knows what lay inside? And he's at least 1.5 feet taller.
Hello! Are your guests come to visit? I've been so lonely out here.
Out of the way, you wrinkled dish rag. We need food.
I have some nice biscuits in the... Oh, no.
Move over!
Don't mind if we do. Do you have any Marmite? Know that I'm judging you severely by your next words.
So the next couple weeks passed much more pleasantly. We had food, shelter, someone insignificant to cater to our every whim and needs, and then...
Oh dear, what is that?
It's your place, you go look.
Flawless logic, comrade. Yes, go stick your neck out and let us know if something dangerous attacks you.
Worst movie ever! So cringe!
What the hell?
Where's a flamethrower when you need it?
Instant classic! The movie was a whole movie.
Wait, I think he's trying to communicate. Quick, pass me that tinfoil. Hold him down. No, his other leg. No, that's not his leg. It's kind of a hat.
Ugh. Chumps.
Oh, never mind. He's a zombie.
No. CHUMPS, cinephile, humanish, underground, mutant pricks. I was getting chased by a whole pack of them through the woods, so I pretended to be one so I could escape undetected.
Nice Shaun of the Dead callback. Really?
Cornetto saved my life tonight.
Well, who's going to save our door? You smashed it to pieces, you lummox.
Oops, my bad. Thanks for the hat. By the way, I think I was pretending to be one for so long, it was starting to get to my brain meats.
That's all you've got to say for yourself. My bad. Even after we saved you from encroaching Cinemania?
Cine what now?
That is it. You are hereby cursed to be our guardian and keep our gateway secure until you discharge your duty and replace this door.
Okay.
Oh, well, that was easy.
But we had better put it in the bylaws.
And that was how we got our first bylaws. And as everyone knows, you can't have a secret society without bylaws. But only slightly less well known is that once you have bylaws, you have to form a secret society. Also, never start a land war in Asia. And so we all moved into an abandoned video rental store in the strip mall of the damned to continue our important work. And that's the story of how we met. We've been conclaving ever since and sharing our warnings and knowledge to keep other film goers safe.
Yes. Yeah, it happened exactly like that, only completely different.
Since we never got back to that cabin, I'm still stuck on guard duty, but it's kind of nice. Doors are growing on me.
And our bylaws have grown significantly.
And what are all they doing here?
What do you mean?
You finished telling your story, but they're all still here.
What to tell you guys? They do what they want. They are not big fans of the fourth wall. Oh, yeah, and Brother Methuselah keeps hanging around.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, we're all caught up and we're all canon now, so that's good to know.
Andrea, what are you even doing here?
Well, I got this jury duty summons.
We don't send jury duty summons. We tend to enjoy punishing the same 3 or 4 people for what they did to Paddington 2.
Are you arguing with me?
Ooh,
come
no,
on,
don't do that.
no.
Danger, Will Robinson, don't do that.
Get some order in this court,
gentlemen,
Judge.
order.
More of a peaceful...
Order in my court, please. Order. If we may, could we get back to the matter at hand, which is the people versus the Long Kiss Goodnight?
Which
that
I will be
1996
defending.
action thriller that followed a spy inflicted with amnesia, a private investigator as they unravel a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top. May we? Can we? Are we all good?
Oh, very
All right,
well.
Sounds
Well, for
amazing.
those of
That's
you
why I'm
unfamiliar with
here.
our court proceedings, we're here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Representing our side of the canon, it's Mr. Maynard Bangs. You are the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, I often sing the things I do so I don't forget them. You know, like da-na-na-na-na, sitting here in this chair, da-na-na-na-na, recording a podcast, da-na-na-na-na, gotta prosecute this movie,
No singing.
Gonna prove that it's dumb, da-na-na-na, convince some new jurors, da-na-na-na-na, even though they're all friends, da-na-na-na-na, it's okay, I got a guy on the inside, da-na-na-na-na, he's gonna have my back, da-na-na-na-na, can't tell you which one it is though, da-na-na-na-na, but it's Andy, da-na-na-na, gonna put a big strain on their relationship, da-na-na-na-na, gonna tear them apart, da-na-na-na-na, wedding invitations will be rescinded, da-na-na-na-na, accusations will fly, da-na-na-na-na, this is exactly what the sin assassins wanted, da-na-na-na-na,
Hey.
all part of their plan, da-na-na-na-na, gonna use this time to strike, da-na-na-na-na, take out one of their crew, da-na-na-na-na, can't tell you which one it is though, da-na-na-na-na, but it's Andy.
Hey.
The loss will really rally the group back together, da-na-na-na-na, against their common hated foe, da-na-na-na-na, they'll come back and they'll beat them, da-na-na-na-na, to avenge the death of Andy. Thank you. Anyway, it could happen.
And this is why we have a bylaw that says no singing.
Oh,
unless
I
it's
see.
me.
This is our courtroom. That motion is overruled. There will be plenty singing here, and I may sentence one of you to sing if Mr.
Unbelievable.
Maynard wins.
Ah,
This right here is what it sounds like when doves cry.
I really like the part when Andy died.
I knew it.
I like the part that we all have to share a chair with someone.
Yeah. Well, you know, budget cuts being what they are. Representing the defense, it's Mr. Daniel
Yes.
Scribner. Please present your opening statement.
I can do that. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it was a long time ago in a decade far, far away called the 90s, a time of great upheaval and civil unrest in the action film industry, as the age of everyman heroes like John McClane felt the first tread of a new breed of Jerry Bruckheimer jackbooted military machos. Enter a script by Shane Black, whose name itself is an action hero. A script so good it sold for an unprecedented $4 million. A script that screamed out to be made. But it had a problem. The secret council of squares and suits in Hollywood convened. What are we to do with this brilliant script that we want to make into an action movie that's going to make us all rich that happens to star a woman? We know we made Alien and Aliens and Terminator 2, and those were rocket successes. But that must have been despite their female leads, right? But come that fateful day in 1996, when The Long Kiss Goodnight opened, a day when a scrawny nerd who will remain nameless and is not me was in high school and didn't have anything better to do and had no idea what he was walking into, but walked into it anyway. Gina Davis stood up and said, "Fuck the patriarchy. Let's make a goddamn action flick."
Yeah.
Now, I would just like to take this moment also to address the unfounded accusations of jury tampering. I will have you know that while I may know and associate with these fellow comrades of the Cinemania Society on the jury, let me tell you something. They are really good at finding things guilty. We argue all the time. I am loading the jury against myself here. I'll just have
That's
to know.
true. Yeah.
Suspicion is enough
It's
to
true.
convict where we come from.
What is this? What is this roof you speak of?
I want to join the Cinema Society if we get to find everything guilty.
We want you to join it too.
When do we get to execute someone? I want to execute someone.
I
Patience,
think we
Andy.
have some
Not
extra
quite yet.
fezzes. Yeah.
The joy will be that much more sweet if you wait for it. Mr. Maynard can now present his opening argument. I
It's
screwed it
catchy.
all up.
It's catchy, isn't it? Your Honor, this movie has too many bad guys. Once one is introduced, he gets killed off and they introduce another. The first we're introduced to is One-Eyed Jack. The odd thing is, he had this nickname years before he lost his eye. No, I'm kidding. Apparently, they did just call him Jack. You can see how his blinding helped his brand. Now, this guy gets introduced. I'm into it. I'm a big fan of Joseph McKenna's work on The Adventures of Pete and Pete as the Garbage Man. So I'll give him a shot. Now, One-Eye Jack used to know Gina Davis in her prior life. He was supposed to kill her, but instead grazes her with a bullet, which causes her to lose her memory and fall into the sea, assumed dead. We know that shit happens all the time, right? I mean, that is something that happens when bullets graze you. Yeah. Well, one day, One-Eye Jack is watching TV. He's kept in some super highly advanced prison cell like he's fucking Magneto or something, instead of some shitty low-level thug missing an eye, which he actually is. And he sees Gina Davis on the TV. And even though he hasn't seen her in 8 years, and even though she's changed the color and style of her hair, and even though she's on a 12-inch TV and 180p that he's watching from across the room through the grating of his Magneto cell, and he only has depth perception provided to him by one eye, he recognizes her. Never mind that this
Gina Davis.
Never mind that this woman has actively been seeking out her real identity for 8 years, so would have certainly plastered her picture on posters and newspaper ads and milk cartons everywhere in this state alone, asking, "Do you know me?" Apparently, all she had to do to get recognized was appear on a snippet of news programming for less than 4 seconds. To think of all the money she wasted on private detectives. And while I'm on the topic, even though her memory is gone, there would still be dental records and fingerprints on file. They're a requirement of any federal employee minimum. And you might say, oh, maybe they're out of the database because she's a CIA spy. But if she's missing in action, they probably should be there. Or if someone turns up with those fingerprints, it should set some alarms off at the CIA. Hey, someone with Gina Davis's fingerprints is getting them fingerprinted. Maybe we should look into this. This is the sort of trope carried over from the witness protection program type of genre. Gina Davis isn't hiding, though, because she doesn't know she's supposed to. So there's no reason that it should take them 8 years to find her.
Mr. Scribner, the suspension of disbelief may be a bit high here. Do you have any rebuttal to this?
Did we lose?
Sorry about that. I was on mute.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, you got
to interrupt. You can make a
okay.
I
thought this was opening remarks, so I wasn't sure.
No, it's all good. I did the song. Remember, it was really good.
Right. I do indeed have a rebuttal here. Now, you ask, how did he recognize her? You got to remember, we're talking about Gina Davis here, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we may have different standards of beauty as time evolves, but Gina Davis transcends all of those standards. So, I mean, just for one, like a quick haircut change is not going to make that big a difference. I mean, you can tell from the way that the camera leers at her that, everyone was staring at her, even the camera people for the news crew. Yeah. Now, you ask, how did she not get found sooner with all these PIs that she hired to ask questions, the fingerprints and the dental records? Now, let's remember that she specifically says that the first PIs she hired were worth more money. They were high rent. She's only now down to the low rent Samuel L. Jackson, which is admittedly an insult to Samuel L. Jackson. But that aside, high rent PIs, they know how to keep their mouths shut. They know how to ask around without drawing too much attention. And as for fingerprints and dental records, let's remember we're talking about the 90s here. Even today, databases for the government with electronic health records suck.
They would have.
There is lots and lots of reason that different states were not swapping information with each other. Let's also remember where she washed up. She washed up in New Jersey. New Jersey's DMV records are still running on COBOL from the 1960s.
She's a CIA agent, and as you did say, high rent detectives. But I'll keep moving on. So, One-Eye Jack recognizes her. So he breaks out of prison. Apparently, he was always just there under his own will. Because the moment he needs to break out of prison, it's barely an inconvenience. The movie doesn't even bother showing it to us. That's how procedural and uninteresting a prison breakout this was.
I would just like to note,
unremarkable.
I would just like to note, yes, very unremarkable. That prison, probably very unremarkable. Again, correctional facility in New Jersey.
With a Magneto-like cell.
Is it though? I mean, he's just sitting in a room watching TV. The TV has more protection than him. It's got that like cage over it.
Which would make Gina Davis hard to recognize through, especially at a distance. But Now, so he tracks Gina Davis down.
Quick query here. Technically, considering when this came out, doesn't Magneto get held in a one-eyed Jack style cell?
That's true.
I agree.
Good point
One
to
point to
Jerry.
Andy. 1 point to Andy. Now, so
Mr. Maynard, you may continue.
He tracks Gina Davis down, seemingly under the impression she's still keeping his eye on ice for 8 years. And of course, she immediately kills him. One-eyed Jack, more like one-scene Jack. So now the movie needs a new bad guy. But luckily, we have Gina Davis's old arch nemesis, who goes by the codename Daedalus, which is a poor choice of name if any of the men who follow him find out what happened to Icarus. Fun fact, Daedalus also designed the labyrinth. That's not relevant here. It's just cool if you're into Greek mythology.
Yep.
Anyway, the movie seems set.
Dead.
We have Daedalus now. He's played by David Morse, who's like one of those guys who you've seen in everything, so he makes for a convincing antagonist. But no, after one scene of water torturing Gina Davis, which was something that she and her then husband, director of this film, Rennie Harlan, apparently practiced a lot for this film. TMI, Gina. Daedalus
hours upon hours in a ice cold bathtub to figure out how long she could hold her breath.
It wasn't worth it, Gina.
I would disagree.
Probably less time than she had to hold her breath during the reviews. So Daedalus gets killed off too. Now we need a new bad guy again. But who the fuck do we get after One-Eyed Jack, after Daedalus? We get fucking Timothy.
I know, with the name Timothy.
That's his entire fucking name.
There's some who call him Tim.
And it's perfect.
They never call him Tim, though.
He's the
I wonder why.
His name
maybe
is
he's gonna maybe he's gonna end up being even more Daedalus.
He might end up being. This name is perfect because he's basic bad guy as fuck. He's been talking to the other guys. You just kind of assume he's been a henchman up to this point because he's never been in an episode of Pete and Pete. But it turns out he's our main villain. He's our pumpkin spice flavored villain. So cliche that he even explains his entire plan to Gina Davis at the end. I'm gonna die anyway, I just want to know. Well, sure, here's the plan in a nutshell, along with complete schematics and the code to disarm the device.
Now, let me ask the prosecution one question. I just want to check our exhibits here. Is Timothy the villain? He is certainly the sort of main bad guy in terms of screen time, but is he the villain? It seems like Perkins is the villain.
That's my point, is we have too many. That Perkins I'm about to introduce makes sense.
Yeah, there's kind of a Rolodex here.
Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to be helping you.
That might be true.
Well, would you like to address the Rolodex of villains? Does
I would
add to the excitement.
Yes,
More bang
would
for
you
your
like
buck?
to? Before let me bring up Perkins just to frame him, and then you can.
Quick procedural question: Is David Morse that actor who looks like his face is too small for his head?
Yes, that's the guy.
He does look like he's
David Morse is that guy. He's that
small
guy.
That's what it says on his casting sheet.
He is in everything. He played George Washington once too.
Yeah,
I am going to get to David Morse, but I'll let you finish off on the rest of the villains.
But yeah,
Some actors are wide heads and some are small faces. He's a small face.
you gotta be something.
There are no
And
small
what's
heads,
Pete
just small
Postlethwaite?
actors.
On his business cards, it says small face, big emotions.
Okay, order in my court. Order in my court. Maynard, please present your last.
But last thing about Timothy, all he ever is nasty, cruel, and condescending. He has no flavor to him. I mean, he'll kill his own daughter. He'll let his own men die. He's bad. You get it? His whole character is basically a toxic ex-boyfriend who wants to destroy the world, except he's not actually an ex-boyfriend. Maybe more on that later. But the last villain we have is CIA Director Perkins, Gina's old boss, because the entire terrorist plot in this film is framed as being a false flag operation funded by the CIA, just like the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Side note, it was the FBI heavily implicated in that bombing, not the CIA, but this movie has been conflating and confusing the two agencies the entire time. So why should it stop now? Also, I just want to mention, Gina has been actively pursuing all these bad guys, at least Timothy and Daedalus, 8 years ago, before she lost her memory. And that, at that time, is when they were first planning Operation Honeymoon. That's why she realizes when they go to Niagara Falls, Operation Honeymoon, it's a pre-amnesia knowledge. So why did it take them 8 years to fucking reschedule this false flag operation? And it just so happens to be the same fucking week she gets her memory back. Talk about
I have to raise an
unlucky
objection
timing.
here, Your
Please
Honor.
do.
This is actually this is actually a misread of the plot. Operation Honeymoon is recent. She refers to getting engaged to Daedalus, but that's not in relation to honeymoon. Engagement being code for she is on target to kill Daedalus. Daedalus. What they say is actually several years have gone by. Back then, Daedalus and Timothy were the bad guys that Perkins and Charlie were in, like, legitimately hunting. But because they've had their budgets cut so much over time, let's remember the 90s, it wasn't just about 1993's bombing and the FBI's failures or false flag, the suspicion of a false flag move there. But we'd had years of these kinds of plots coming up in movies because the military had been getting stepped down so much over the years under the Clinton administration and so forth. We weren't the big, tough world cops that we had been for a long time.
And so this began under Reagan and then further under Bush.
Fair enough.
Hey, Jurors, stop helping him.
Just make it a point.
I'm going to allow it.
Where I went to college was a military base that was closed down by H.W. Bush. It was the largest army base west of the Mississippi. So I remember who closed it down. But Clinton was the one who caught the blame for it. That's all.
Yeah, H.W. Bush founded the Wheels of Justice, so I don't want anyone speaking ill of him in this courtroom.
That's fair.
Continue your rebuttal, Mr. Scribner.
So just to close on my rebuttal, so kind of like working that forwards, if you think of action movies as always reflective of like whatever anxieties in the sort of American psyche we have at the time, that notion of like the fundraiser style false flag operation that had been growing in action movies all throughout the 90s. So Operation Honeymoon was a recent thing where Perkins had actually turned to working with Daedalus and Timothy because he was basically out of options. So that was actually a recent thing.
I will rebut to that because I had one reading of the plot like that until a very crucial scene when they're there with the operator and are tracing the call and they realize that Timothy is in Niagara Falls. That is when she gasps.
From in Niagara Falls.
That's when Gina Davis gasps and says Operation Honeymoon.
Well, yeah,
I don't believe there's
talk about Operation Honeymoon, but
is that in the prior scene? Is that when they and they gave up everything and said it's going to happen in Niagara Falls and gave up every detail to her?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so that is a misreading that she didn't know that pre. I will give you that then because it was rather a confusing plot. But then that means that in those 8 years where they would have had a perfect opportunity to carry this off at any time, it still tends to be a terrible coincidence that they're going to carry off this new operation the exact same week she regains her memory. It's
Perkins even comments on that. Perkins even comments on that. He's like, why now? Like, why is she resurfacing now? Right when we're trying to do this operation?
You have a bad screenwriter, Perkins.
I would disagree.
So does every James Bond film, Mr. Maynard.
I mean,
do you have another exhibit you'd like to present?
I would. But yeah, Shane Black did sell the script for $4 million, I'd like to mention. And then when all of his fellow screenwriters accused him of commercialism, he stopped writing Hollywood blockbusters for almost 10 years. And if I wrote this script, I'd feel guilty too. So the final exhibit I'm going to touch on is the lack of nuance in this film. The ultimate problem is this is an action film first and foremost. It's woefully unequipped to deal with any of the heavy themes of identity and self it raises, or to tease them out interestingly enough in one act to qualify as, say, a taut thriller, where the slow emergence of this personality played out like psychological horror. Gina Davis is a good enough performer to carry that off. She could bring a lot of herself to the duality of this character if she's given time. But due to the constraints of the genre where they have to stick 40 minutes of action at the end, she just has to flip a switch and become the other identity completely and fully, almost magically. There can't be a subtle, slow way to do it. It's completely binary. Now she's an ass kicker, full and complete. That robs the character of the ability to be properly explored. Now, think about who this character is. We have a woman here that was impregnated, basically without her consent. We don't get to see very much of this, but Charlie says explicitly, I didn't ask for the kid. Samantha had the kid, not me. Nobody asked me. Man, talk about a bombshell. We're basically talking about a woman being impregnated against her consent who carries to term without her consent, really because she couldn't remember that she didn't want a kid. And we know that the pregnancy wasn't pretty. Timothy says to Jack, when they're still outside the trunk of the car, don't get cute, try to play doctor first. I made that mistake. That's the way he frames it. And that's all we really hear about their fling, is that it's playing doctor. Now, the screenplay goes into this a little more. Charlie tells us that she sleeps with Timothy in order to assassinate him mid-coitus. But he, quote, bashed me in the head, finished, then threw me in the trunk of the car. That line doesn't remain in the final film. It's only in Black's screenplay. But I think it's pertinent information about this tale that touches on the topics of consent and bodily autonomy that the film doesn't have any actual interest in exploring or unpacking because it needs to cram 40 minutes of action set pieces in the end. It has no time to wrestle with its most interesting ideas.
So I can't rebut you on the specifics of how she got pregnant. I've seen that line too, and I think it's a fascinating line. And I do wish they had left it in. It could have been just a couple of split seconds to squeeze that in. But when she says it wasn't my choice, I think what she's referring more to is the choice to keep the pregnancy rather than to get pregnant or to have sex in the first place. Because she was having, I think she was having sex, you know, as part of her mission with Timothy. They may have even removed the line thinking back in the day that, hey, the implication of rape here is going to just be too nuanced and too confusing to a 90s audience, especially in the middle of it.
But then objection, why keep the playing doctor line?
Well, so the playing doctor, he's talking to One-Eyed Jack. He's telling One-Eyed Jack not to mess around.
He says, I made that mistake. He says, I made that mistake.
Right, because they had slept together. But
because he played doctor.
Right. Well, because he played, but the mistake that he made, right, was in sleeping with her at all, right? Because she didn't beat him up after he started raping her, right? At first, it was consensual, or at least consensual in the sense that she was actively participating in like tricking him to try and kill him, right?
Yes.
Now, and admittedly, I am not an expert in this level of gender politics and nuance, so I want to be.
That's why I threw it out. That's why I introduced it.
No, you're not the Supreme Court here,
right? But I'll just note, with One-Eyed Jack, largely that's just a warning to him because the minute he tries to start getting frisky with the unconscious Charlie, she comes to and makes him, you know, one-eyed as opposed to two-eyed Jack, though, as you say, that was a distinct improvement in his branding.
I agree. I'm going to close off this topic saying that a lot of this nuance does exist in the screenplay. This film had the ability to add this dimension. It didn't have the interest. The script actually has Charlie explaining to Mitch her history of sexual abuse at the hands of her father. And this information informs the self-reliance and closed-off nature of Charlie. But that's not in the movie. Also lost is this passage, a confession Charlie makes to Mitch, which would have helped to really marry the duality of the character, to marry her past with her present, to actually reconcile the uncomfortable nature of her non-consensual pregnancy. She says, quote, I saw a little girl. That's what happened under the water. That night 8 years ago. At the end, there she was, this pretty little girl at the bottom of the ocean, smiling at me. 3 years old. Didn't know daddy's hidden closets. Not yet. Stared up at me in the strangest way, saying, how did it all come to this? We were so pretty and perfect. Now look at us, sinking with our head all open. Said when she grew up, she was going to teach school. She couldn't wait. I have no idea why this was cut from the film. It reconciles the idea that Sam was deep inside Charlie all along, something that Sam Jackson's character suggests, but it's not confirmed by Charlie herself. This shows that they're not two separate people, merely two sides of the same coin. Without Charlie saying it, though, and showing that it's almost an unconscious choice, but a choice nonetheless, the silence is deafening. But obviously, this had to get cut to save room for another dumb explosion or one-liner from Sam Jackson. And with that, I rest.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. I will remind the jury that the theatrical cut is what is on trial here. With that, Daniel Scribner, you may present your first exhibit.
I'm saying the lack of it.
No. I think what is left on the cutting room floor is valid grounds for argument for or against the movie's cause of Cinemania. And I hate to bring a rebuttal to that last point because it was just made so eloquently. I mean, regardless of content. Or the validity of the content. It's just,
that's what he does.
The language that just sings. So rather than rebut directly, I actually had planned in my exhibits to talk about exactly the sorts of things that you're bringing up. I will just say that while the first line that you said got left on the cutting room floor, I agree should not have. I think that story that you cited that should have been left in the film, I think that was cut, but for very intentional reasons that I'm going to get to in one of my exhibits.
All right.
Dun, dun, dun. So let's go to Exhibit A. Now, you mentioned that you, in your assessment of this film, in your indictment of this film, that important pieces were cut out just for another one-liner from Samuel Jackson. My first exhibit actually would be that incredible dialogue. Let's just look at some of these zingers for a second, right? This is phenomenal dialogue writing. You put aside plot structure, anything else, but the dialogue itself sinks in every single line. I would cut 100 tearjerker scenes to get one more Brian Cox line about his wife's dog licking its ass. That was, I cried when I heard that line. I had never even seen Brian Cox before in 1996. And I went out and I just dragged Blockbuster and my local library for every film I could find with Brian Cox, just to get one more moment of him talking about where he keeps his guns.
Your Honor, question from the jury. Just wanted to confirm that the defense claims that he was dragging the library for Cox.
That is in the record, yes.
I'll allow it.
That's what we wrote down.
That was entirely intentional, sir. Thank you for catching that.
I like this guy.
First,
Mr. Maynard, do you have any rebuttal to Brian Cox? I can't imagine that
I
there would be.
don't. He's still the best Hannibal Lecter. So.
Yep. All right. So be it. Mr. Scribner, please present your next exhibit.
I'm not even done with the first exhibit. We're talking about dialogue, right? Where this is Shane Black at the top of his game. And this is where I want to talk about that script and supposedly why he quit. Now, it sold for $4 million, which, by the way, was unprecedented. It beat the previous record by a country mile, right? By far the highest ever sold script for its time. And
what was the previous record, please? Question from the jury. Previous record?
1.25.
Mr. Rodriguez confirms.
Was that for Showgirls too? I think.
I thought that was for Basic Instinct. That was
$3 million, if I remember correctly.
Showgirls too.
Do keep in mind when films are sold versus when the films are made. They might not be, co-chronological.
Yeah, it's the script. Yeah.
So yeah, because I think other things might have sold for close to that shortly thereafter. Because let's keep in mind, his script was so good, and when it sold for that, now. He didn't quit. Yes, he was accused of commercialism and so forth, but it wasn't that he quit because he was guilty about the film or because he sold out, but rather he felt badly that was the reaction from his writer community, when from his perspective, what he had done is he had broken the cap for everybody. After that, many more films started selling the actual scripts for more and more money, right? Most of the time scripts would sell for union rate, right? $250,000, which I don't even know if that's changed much over the years. I should hope so. In the most recent.
WGA exist? Is his portrait like on their wall now?
Yeah, basically. So I want everybody just to keep in mind of just how much impact this had. Also, as the honorable prosecuting attorney noted, right, there is a substantial amount of exposition in this film, right? There's a bit of a convoluted spy plot.
A bit.
But how did they manage to make it so enjoyable? But by interrupting it with conversations about tits that are coming from around the corner with enough time for you to comb your hair, Fooey, I burned the damn muffins, where he keeps his gun next to Mr. Willie, right? What's the weather on the planet that you live on? Like, just constant, every single line, even in the midst of the exposition, is funny, and it keeps you interested in ways that most movies don't. That is my first exhibit.
I'll agree that Sam Jackson is at full pomp. This is Sam Jackson doing the Sam Jackson thing. People weren't tired of it yet, but there are a lot of other movies you can get Sam Jackson.
We've never been tired of it.
I was going to ask about that.
Sure, you haven't. Okay. But I mean, this is definitely him at his peak. He was just coming off of Die Hard with a Vengeance. He was in the titular role as a Vengeance. Everything was going great for Sam at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, but I don't think it's just him, right? Exhibit B are the characters. Now, I want to talk mostly about the heroic characters, or the protagonists, not the antagonists. I'll get to that in a second. But we're talking about memorable, likable characters because they're funny, right? They're living through this very serious stuff. And also, let's be honest, it's an action movie. This somewhat over-the-top, unbelievable stuff. But they're humanized because they're so funny. Right? Not even just Samuel Jackson, though he really is funny. Even the outfits that he's wearing are just stunning.
French kiss,
yeah, totally. That's Exhibit C. Just the outfits. But it humanizes them, right? Even her husband, who you'd think is going to be like, or not husband, but boyfriend. They've been living together for several years. He's effectively acting as the father to her child.
Do you know his name?
Ben, right?
No, that's our judge name. Must be a very memorable character. His name was Hal.
Hal, right? So
Ben's our
he is-
favorite.
Three letters.
he is memorable.
I'm sorry, Dave, but can you please repeat that?
You
I
may not
can't
know
do
his
that either.
name. You may not know his name, but he does stand out. He seems like the kind of guy who'd be a boring wet rag compared to like, a secret agent turned, PTA mom, right? But he jokes back and forth with her, right? He's got that wildly floppy hair, and he's strongly supportive of her. When One-Eyed Jack shows up, he doesn't just bolt or run for the phone, right? He tackles the guy. I mean, the guy's got a shotgun straight out of a John Woo film that shoots rockets through the wall, and he does not flinch. Now, admittedly, he is just a normal guy, so he folds like cardboard once he's.
It's actually a
against the wall,
husband.
but
I believe they're married. I believe
they
she does
married?
say
Yeah,
at the front that they are
Oh, okay.
married. Yeah,
right.
I believe so.
So all of these characters are made really funny, and what's really important here is that these are human characters, right? That we are still in the age of action heroes like John McClane, right? Samuel L. Jackson, like this is his peak period. I think what made Samuel L. Jackson so lovable to audiences through several of his movies, with the one exception of his biggest like stardom role around the same time of Pulp Fiction, is he's actually still a pretty normal guy. He's not super powered. He's not hyper competent, right? He's just a guy with a lot of rage.
Been there. Mr. Maynard, do you have any rebuts to the husband?
not to the husband, just as far as the characters in general. Like I said, I think there are too many villains and they get less interesting. One-Eye Jack is easily the most sort of vibrant and big. He really possesses the screen, and then it gets all the way down to like Perkins and Timothy, who are just such wet blankets and so dull. This movie can't decide if it wants to be, over the top crazy action, having, Gina Davis dye her hand super blonde and be super seductress and all this stuff, or something dark and talk about false flag operations. It can't find a tone.
Why not?
So we're going to get to that. That is actually my last exhibit. I do want to address the wet blanket in the room. This movie is not perfect. I would agree. I think there is no defense for the villains in this film. They don't hold a candle to the protagonist. I think the closest that they come to that is David Morse, who actually, for just a brief moment, brings just a little bit of life to the villains. Even as they humanize him. I mean, she even knows that he sits down to pee, right? We learn something human about every single one of them, even goddamn Timothy, right? That he shares his daughter's eyes, right? Now, normally I think that, how they hire like child actors, it's really hard to find a good child actor. So they're usually going to hire them if they like looked like somebody or something like that. I think in this case, whoever the actor is who played Timothy, they hired him because he looked like the girl. Honestly, I think that's the case. So there is no.
I believe that his performance makes me believe that.
Oh, it's terrifying. Yeah, it's so bad. I think they would have been a much better choice if they just kind of kept David Morse. Like even the way he just, hold your breath, Major. We're going to do the torture thing now. Like that's
I will remind you, you're on the defense though.
Listen, I'm just being honest. Fair enough. Okay, but let's talk about what is this movie really about. I would argue to the judge, to the jury, even to the prosecution, that what we're looking at here is an intentional balance of tone, right? Now, this is an extension with Samantha Cain and Samuel L. Jackson as normal people living through really extraordinary situations and trying to tough it through, balanced against the very first footsteps, as I said in my opening arguments, of the hyper-militarized, hyper effective, hyper competent action heroes coming in, not like Rambo, but like the Jerry Bruckheimer, all of the Michael Bayhem is about to follow, right? With The Rock and Con Air all coming out around the same time. This movie, I think, very intentionally straddles the line between the two of them. We're not meant to root for all of the rah-rah or the hyper competence, right? Charlie, and this is why I think they left that on the cutting room floor, Charlie is not the good guy. We're not supposed to like Charlie. Charlie's an asshole, right? She, when saying, I wouldn't have kept the kid, she's saying I would have had an abortion. Now, I don't think there's a problem with that. But for audiences in the 90s, that would have been a beat that makes you at least question whether you like her for a second. She would have done that without hesitating, just because she wants to keep living her life, keep having a good time, and not be tied down. Now, again, I don't agree with those politics, but those are the politics of your average audience of the 90s. So this movie is very specifically trying to straddle the line between those two worlds. And it also shows you through a stunning performance from Geena Davis in the middle of an action movie where you admittedly aren't able to give a lot of time to it, that there are these subtle nuances in the way that she's wrestling with who she was and who she is now and how she tries to merge those two. I think that you see this in subtle ways, both at times where she's blending the two characters. So they're not even wrestling with each other. And not just at the end where she has reached a perfect apotheosis and merged the two personas into one, but even along the way, right? We see that when she reacts to her daughter breaking her arm on the ice, on the ice and telling her to get up, life is pain. We see that later on when she's starting to practice out her handwriting and trying to figure out who these signatures belong to, and the cursing is starting to bleed in. But we'll note that she was always kind of had that slightly edgy, pushy kind of sense of humor, right? She was even joking to her husband about the nativity scene, about how it was the first time that Joseph was staring at the three wise men's tits the whole time, right? So, I mean, those personalities were always there and kind of blended together. And I think the point is the reason they cut away from trying to do a deep, in-depth character study of Charlie, and the reason they cut that conversation is they would rather focus on how that reflects the balance of different styles of action movies that were starting to come out around the time that this movie was made. I think that was simply a choice made by the director and by the cast of what was more interesting to them to explore as a theme of the movie. Whether we want hyper competent badasses like James Bond and like Nicolas Cage in Con Air, or Sean Connery in The Rock, or we were still more interested in John McClane and heroes of that ilk. And I think that that's a really valid kind of conversation that you want to have through a movie. And it's not nothing that, despite the fact that this film did not do well at all, and I think, and that has largely been argued that has nothing to do with the quality of the film itself, which generally got good reviews, both from viewers coming out of it, test audiences, and also from the critics. It did pretty well, but rather it was coming on the heels of a colossal flop called Cutthroat Island. That's generally what's considered to have damaged this movie so much at the box office and in sort of recollection.
Hey, I like that movie.
Listen.
It's on record.
However you feel about it, it is one of the biggest flops in history, and it destroyed several careers and an entire movie studio.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen.
Pirate movies for me.
We have got Cutthroat Island's one fan here today.
We'll have you back to defend it. We'll have you back.
Just for you.
We're going to cover that one too. Yeah,
two fans. I liked that movie as well.
You hush.
I stand with them.
Right. So think about it, right? So this movie that flopped at the box office because unfairly, that Geena Davis, right, practiced a water torture scene over and over again in her bathtub with Rennie Harlan, her then husband, and the director, just to get it right because she wanted to do it for real in the filming. And this film probably happened around the same time that Rennie Harlan started cheating on her with her personal assistant and got her personal assistant pregnant, which led to a very ugly breakup.
But then she lost her memory.
Right, then she lost her memory. Exactly. So even so, when she got her memory back, she has always said that, thinking back on this is one of her favorite movies to rewatch. This is one of her favorite movies to make. So Rennie Harlan says the same thing. Samuel L. Jackson says the same thing. And that tells me something about the making of this film. I rest my case.
Would you like to rest there? All right, Mr. Maynard, any rebuts to the Geena Davis character or the dynamic?
No, that sounds like a rebut to my stuff earlier, where I think they had time, they had the material to make it nuanced, but they cut it for time for action sequences because Shane Black's big thing was Lethal Weapon, so he was always chasing Lethal Weapon for the rest of his career. And you can see that in the last 40 minutes of this movie.
All sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Bangs, you may begin.
Yeah, this one right here goes out to all the motherfuckers. Motherfucker fuckers. Motherfucker mothers. It goes like this. I'm sorry, Sam Jackson. Woo! Know how I feel. Never meant to do you any harm. Loved when raptors ate you, except your arm. I'm sorry, Sam Jackson. Woo! It's not your fault. Gina Davis dyed her hairdo blonde, killing motherfuckers like James Bond. This Gina Davis got a crazy thing going on. She got whacked on the head, now her memories are gone. Then she got whacked again, now her memories returned. Her brain injuries have me traumatically concerned. Sam Jackson, I'm sorry, Sam Jackson. Woo, I'll say something nice. If you like your films with villains, this film here has got a trillion. I'm sorry, Sam Jackson. Woo, don't hold a grudge. It's my duty here to prosecute. I can't help my points were all astute. I'm sorry, Sam Jackson.
I'll allow that one.
More singing.
More singing.
It is in the bylaws.
Mr. Scribner, you may present your closing argument.
Yes. Now, while my opposition to the prosecution may have been eloquent, I think their points were far from astute. As we saw, there were several misreadings of the basic script, let alone the nuances of the theme choice made by the director and by the actors. We are looking at a movie that was of its time and ahead of its time, and a commentary on its time, all in one. And so I need say no more than I think that while this movie may have been misjudged in its time because of 4 trailers that were misrepresentative and it followed on the heels of Cutthroat Island, however you may feel about that, Andrea, in hindsight, everyone looking back on this film is going to remember it as a film that they want to keep close to them, right next to Mr. Willie.
Ooh. Thank you, Mr. Scribner. Members of the jury, Miss Andrea Palladino, Mr. Ethan Ireland, and Mr. Hey, that's not Ryan Luis Rodriguez, Andy Slack. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now if you determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
We want biscuits. I want biscuits and tea.
You won't get no biscuits and tea in my courtroom. That comes out of my paycheck. And now get in there with you.
Wait a minute. What am I supposed to do?
You can watch the door.
Fair enough.
Don't want any
hope they don't have
tampering,
blasters.
remember?
Oh, okay. All right then.
All right. So Andy, Ethan, what are your thoughts on this film?
Well, I have a thought I'd like to express, if I may. My name is Andy and I'm stealing your bits. I think I preferred the bluesy riffs. I'm not trying to say that your argument's crap, but there's no excuse for impromptu rap. Let's get that out of the way.
I didn't do rap. That was the bridge, actually. I didn't do a verse.
I deliberately didn't watch the film before we came into this because I remember seeing it in the 90s and I vaguely remembered, an action film that I liked. And I thought, I'm going to listen to both sides of this argument. And afterwards, do I want to go back and see it again because it's rekindled my love for a childhood favorite? Or am I convinced that it's a pile of tosh that I should just leave in the past? And ultimately, that's what I wanted. I wanted to know, do I want to go back after hearing these arguments? Ooh, the fact that the plot turns out to be an administrative scuffle over budget funding, not good. But then it's Sam Jackson at its peak. It's Gina Davis doing her thing. She's being water tortured. She's got nipples like tiny flesh turtles. It is actually making me swing towards thinking, yeah, I kind of want to see this again. This film does actually bring back some warmth in my mind. I remember some of those funny lines, and yeah, maybe this film does have something to say for it. I'm being swayed towards a positive verdict towards a film. What say you, Ethan?
I, like you, had not watched this film before hearing the arguments. Last time I saw it was when it was in theaters in 1996. I took my girlfriend at the time, who was a Belgian exchange student, to go see it. And she was so utterly, stunned by this film. She just kept saying, "This is so American. This movie is so American." Like, she seemed like she had been suffered through the violence of the actual film as opposed to just having watched it. I do remember liking it. I remember because I liked. Well, I have to say, I will acknowledge that I had a screen crush on Gina Davis, and then I had seen Sam Jackson in Pulp Fiction and loved him in it. So I just loved seeing the two of them together. But yeah, after hearing this analysis of it and seeing other films that were later inspired by it, this film predates The Bourne Identity, which basically copies its same premise. And it predates Atomic Blonde, which I have to say Charlize Theron was clearly copying Gina Davis's performance, or at least heavily, I wouldn't say copying, but heavily inspired by Gina Davis's performance in this. Both of those are good movies, and because I'm somebody who likes to kind of go back to the original, I'm a guy who likes to play really old board games. And I don't just play backgammon, I play the ancient Sumerian version of backgammon that's 6,000 years old because I like the original stuff.
Oh, we've all played the game with the glass beads on the little grid. Yeah, go on.
No. That's
we're not talking about Megiddo. We're talking about the
Mancala.
game of Ur.
Yeah, the royal game of Ur.
The one that the one that Irving Finkel is the world champion of, if you ever want to go meet him. Anyway,
I do not want to meet the champion of the game of Ur. Thank you very much.
Oh, he lives and works in the British Museum. He's quite a character. In any event,
Ethan, even in your game choices, you're so pretentious.
Thank you, Andrea.
Pretentious. Anyhow, yes, I am. That is how I operate. And that being said, I thought because this film is the ancient game of Ur version of this type of secret agent type movie that was then later copied by other more successful franchises. I think it's worth watching again, and I think I'm also positively inclined, even though we come out of a tradition wherein suspicion is enough to convict. I think this film is actually not as bad a movie. I don't think it's as bad a movie as, say, Manos Hands of Fate, which is very much a bad movie.
No.
Well, if you're talking about films ripping off other films, this film is, in fact, almost a remake of an earlier classic. If you think about it, you've got an anti-hero semi-protagonist who dies early. You've got a bad guy who is A. Perkins and a dual identity plot. It's Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho all over again.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. Yeah, I'll get you that. It also, it kind of shares some qualities with Robert Sheckley's novel Crompton Divided as well. But I like that it has a female protagonist. Much better.
I'm sensing we're moving towards a positive feeling here. What do you think, Andrea?
Actually, I have to disagree with both of you.
Oh, here we go.
Because she got pregnant in the middle of a job and then didn't have the opportunity to decide whether she wanted the kid. I kind of hate that whole plot. And it's the woman on the jury to say that. Also, even though I love Gina Davis as much as the next person and Samuel L. Jackson is great, I actually really dislike heroes that are just badasses for the sake of badassery and don't have to overcome any challenges. I was thinking this last night as I was watching a TV show, and I was like, I love that this hero is a badass, but he had to climb up this well like 3 times and consider failing before
I thought you called me the pretentious one, Andrea.
I love John McClane. I wish they did more stuff like that. Like, yeah, you can be awesome, but it's not always easy. So,
well, then you should probably just watch the movie, but only the first 40 minutes.
I do have to acknowledge Andrea's point that it is. I had completely forgotten about that problematic part of the script, and I appreciate the analysis of it and thinking about it, and it coming up as a topic, particularly one that was a culture war topic and one that was really fraught at the time and continues to be so. I don't know if I would convict the whole movie based on that one particular plot point, because this one throws as many plot points. This one is basically a shotgun of plot points.
Plot gun.
Yeah, it's that John Woo shotgun of plot points.
But I interrupted Andrea, and I wanted her to finish her point. I'm sorry.
No, that's pretty much all I had to say. But it sounds like it's 2-1. So I acknowledge I've been overruled. So if you're ready, I can present our verdict to the judge.
I mean,
The
I
very
think I could
handsome
be
judge.
convinced.
It's very close.
Convince
It
Ethan.
is-
Convince him.
I'm on the fence. So, like I don't remember it being particularly good, and I don't remember it being particularly bad. But like I said, it did traumatize a Belgian, so I could be convinced one way or the other.
I just feel like
what's one Belgian?
after hearing the arguments, I feel like I want to see the film again.
Some really bad movies, you might just want to watch them because they're just so bad.
I don't feel like I want to hate watch it though.
You're not hate watch it.
I feel my curiosity is piqued to go back and hear some of that sparkling dialogue and to spend time with young Sam Jackson again.
I don't
Can
know.
you
Maybe
really
we should
cheer
just watch
for a
Space Mutiny.
hero if the villains are so lame?
Well, normally it's the other way around. Normally the villains are the only interesting thing.
That's true.
Yeah. And as a British person, I approve of that.
Andrea, you give Ethan the ultimatum. He's the deciding vote now.
Yeah, lock it in,
Okay.
Ethan. What do you got?
Why don't you spend some time playing the royal game of while you think about it?
You're gonna side with that guy, Ethan? You're gonna side with that guy?
Never gonna live that
I
down.
do like the Royal Game of Ur. I do have to say that it is a lot more fun for me than backgammon.
If you'd like me to substitute in for him, I have strong opinions as well. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
let's have him. Let's have him.
guard the door.
I think we need the alternate juror. I think just so you can get to because right now we've got a hung jury. They always have juror alternates who can come in. So
because he's been sitting here the whole time watching the door, sure, but this is very unusual.
Oh no!
Well,
Does this mean that one of our jurors has fallen to Cinemania?
Probably.
This
It's not
Inquisitor,
Andy,
we're gonna
right?
have to sequester you.
Yeah, we'll have
Okay.
Ethan taken outside and shot. Big Z, what have you got for us?
Well, if you have a hung juror, you need a juror that's hung. So here I come.
Oh God, we picked the wrong alternate juror.
Writing our decision already.
I
Call for
actually did.
mistrial.
I didn't see this movie in the theater. And when it came out, I was working in a video store and we put it on and I watched it again and again and again and again and again. I've probably seen this movie more than anybody else here.
You're out of the jury.
I object to that.
Out of here, Mr. Prosecutor. You're not allowed in the jury room.
And what I will say is that the more you watch this, the more ludicrous it seems, the more unbelievable it seems. So what you're really left with is the impression of the actual acting. And I remember thinking at first that this movie was just a bad La Femme Nikita ripoff. But then they made Point of No Return, which was actually a bad...
direct La Femme Nikita ripoff. Yes.
And a
Yes.
bad one at that.
Which made me appreciate The Long Kiss Goodnight a little better. And enough that I really do believe that The Bourne Identity did just rip off this script. Although I didn't know about the script being the most expensive script to that point. I find that quite interesting. I did think that, especially for the time, it did bring something new to the table. Especially in when we've talked about the action, but we haven't really talked about the quality of action in this movie. And it was quite good. The action pieces in this movie are really good and they stand up to this day. And even that last bit with Samuel L. Jackson crawling out of nowhere after you think he's just dead behind the car, bleeding, even worse than John McClane ever did, and just gonna going, da-na-na-na-na, putting the car in a gear, da-na-na-na-na, gonna mow these motherfuckers down. When he came out and did that, I cheered, and that's actually one of the strongest images I have of this. And Gina Davis just kicking ass in a way that you just didn't see women kick ass back then. And
Except for Sharon Stone, but yeah, actually better so than Sharon Stone did. Yes.
Well, yeah.
Okay, I concede your point, Zach. That is very true. I will change my vote to not guilty.
Yeah.
Drama in the courtroom.
No, it doesn't matter what anyone else says.
Okay, then. Well,
So I think we are unanimous now.
I was going to go full circle and say I hate the movie now.
Oh, you were?
Nah, I'm just fucking with you. I love this movie. It's great. That's unanimous.
This is why we keep him on the door. You realize?
Zach, you're cutting out, man. We can't hear you.
All right. No, I love this movie. I was actually gonna vote yes, that it's not guilty, or that it's
All
a
right.
good movie.
Well, if we're agreed, I will present our verdict to the judge.
Very handsome
Yeah,
judge.
very handsome judge.
Ms. Foreperson, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus the Long Kiss Goodnight, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
It's a good
Well,
movie
I suppose
now.
so.
The verdict
Suck
is
it,
so
Daniel.
rendered. The Long Kiss Goodnight is free to go. I, however, want to forget all about these court proceedings that have happened here today. And I have it on good authority. Mr. Ethan Ireland's going to host a little seminar behind the courthouse about a cool new board game that's the hippest new thing as of 2600 BC. Court is adjourned.
This
Oh,
is
was that right?
Grumbly Grumblerson, furious as ever. Glad we could discuss the motion picture Argyle. Reporting to you live from outside the rails of justice. Maynard Bangs, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict?
This was, I think, an interesting experiment. It was a cool opportunity to get to talk to other jurors and hear other people respond to argumentation than we usually do. So big thanks to Cinemania Society for that. But I would correct Zach one thing. We have not proven that this is a good movie. We've only shown that it's not bad. So yeah, he would need a whole other case to actually prove it's good.
Whole other show.
Whole other show.
Thank you. And here comes Daniel Scribner. I have no idea who the hell you are. Excuse me, can we give it a word on how you feel about today's verdict?
Yeah, I'm fucking pissed. I mean, I'm really disappointed with how the jury ruled today. I mean, regardless of the quality of this film, it is obviously guilty of cinemania. And I'm just beside myself. Not to mention the fact that there was all this talk about how the Bourne identity and the Bourne supremacy were a ripoff of that, when the novels that they were based on were written long before Shane Black ever came to life. So, I mean, I'm just beside myself. I do not know how the jury came to this conclusion.
They're your friends.
What?
No, I would not call them friends. Comrades. Chapter members, perhaps.
Thank you very much. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. I hate this job. I really should resurrect Mumbly.
Mumbly's fine. The very real
Mumbly
Mumbly.
lives.
Yeah,
The very real Mumbly
very
Mumblerson.
real Mumbly Mumbly's alive
But
and well
unfortunately,
in all of us.
the oh, sorry.
No, I'm going to hand it over to you guys anyway. I want you to tell us what you guys do when you're not here prosecuting movies. Tell us about the Cinemania Society.
Yeah, for our less perceptive listeners, we have the entire Cinemania Society with us.
Pretty close
About
anyway.
We raided our
sevens.
fridge, man. Jeremy Black had some beer in there.
We've got what I like to call the sexual core of the society here today.
Yeah, but what does everyone else call it? Let's go with that.
The core four.
All right, so what
Five.
is
Five,
the
sir, five.
Cinemania Society all about? What do you guys do?
Well, I mean, everyone knows what Cinemania is. I don't think we need to go into that. The
No, no,
important
no, no,
thing
no.
is that we judge films and protect the listener from Cinemania by judging those films that they should in no way have anything to do with in case they may contract the aforementioned Cinemania, which, as I said, doesn't need any further explanation.
I keep the other Cinemania members on track.
Awesome.
You were the only one keeping them honest in there. But then you fell for their hoodwinkery.
Yeah, you got hoodwinked. But where can we find you guys? Hit us with some socials.
You can find us at thecinemaniasociety.podbean.com if you want to check out our main site, where you can take a close look at the beautiful caricature artwork that Andy Slack does. That's harder to see on the podcast apps, but you can find us any place fine pods are casted, to quote Robert Evans. You can also visit us at TCS_Cinemania on Twitter, X. You can also see us at
call it Twitter. Fuck them.
at the Cinemania Society on Instagram. We have a pretty active Facebook page where we one of our members who's not here, Hope Bravo, posts a lot and maintains a pretty vivacious conversation with us and our listeners. And you can also just email us at thecinemaniasociety@gmail.com if you have questions, comments, feedback, or if you want to, I don't know, throw us some money to help produce these shows that we do all entirely on our own, with no ad support, I might add. So, yeah, that's us, and I have to say I'm really proud of everybody who's here and everybody showing up to make this show happen.
Oh, feels of justice.
It was good. It did become a feels of justice at the end. I love it.
The real justice was the friends we made along the way.
Absolutely. And even a couple of the enemies we made too. Now, that said, we always ask our guests for recommendations, and we've got so many people today. I want everyone to give a recommendation or two. So, Daniel, you were the victorious here.
Everyone gets
Okay, you get one recommendation. Daniel, you were victorious today. What is your recommendation?
Well, so since I yammered on so much about action movies, this is probably an obvious one, but I would certainly encourage people to go back and rewatch Air Force One.
Nice.
If you really want to think about, like, what were our politics at the time that this movie was made, that is a classic.
All right, no, fantastic.
Get off of my plane.
The President Says Heroes. We had an Independence Day as well. All right, let's move on.
Zach.
Zach, why not?
So patient.
Zach, you were patient. What is your recommendation? What is a movie everyone should see?
A movie that everyone should see. Oh, geez. I'm not bringing this up for any particular reason, but there's this fantastic little movie called Six String Samurai that I don't think gets enough love, from the 90s, about post-apocalyptic Buddy Holly trying to get to Vegas to become the new king of rock and roll while he's being pursued by Death, who just kind of looks a lot like Slash from Guns N' Roses.
Is this
and not for nothing? Bubba Hotep is another good one.
It is before Bubba Hotep?
It's pre
much
Bubba
before.
Hotep.
Much
Bubba Hotep, and it features the Red Elvises, which is a Russian surf rock band who played here in Sacramento fairly frequently. If you like to hear Russian rock and roll, you can listen to them.
You like the ancient game of Ur.
and I'll just say really quick, not for nothing, but after our current conclave that is posting over the next few episodes, we will be doing Six String Samurai next.
Hey!
What? Is that a thing that's happening?
Spoilers.
We're wrapping the season on Six String Samurai. Just starting this Wednesday. Actually, I'm not sure when this will post, but
Me either. This could have been weeks ago.
Anyway, we're probably right in the thick of our run on the 2010 film Rubber, about a psychic killer tire.
You don't like Rubber? Who doesn't like Rubber? I love Rubber.
I don't like Rubber.
You're a monster. We don't like each other, I don't think.
No. It has nothing to do with.
Yeah, we all know Zach likes it raw dog.
Damn straight.
I'm going to Andrea. I want to hear Andrea's recommendation.
Andrea, what's your recommendation for a movie everyone should see?
Well, you might still be able to catch it in the theaters. Give some love to our 90-plus-year-old actresses, June Squibb, Velma, about a 94-year-old woman who is shamelessly called by scammers and sent all this money to them, but then she's gonna get it back. It's like a revenge / spy movie, but with senior citizens involving scooter chases and high tech.
Wait, are the villains that are after her also riding scooters?
That would be great.
No, there is a scene with two scooters facing off in a senior citizen's home. That's pretty funny.
I can plus one this. This movie is 100 years older and 100 times better than The Beekeeper, which basically has the same plot.
I was thinking that.
This movie's awesome.
Check it out, Velma. In theaters now.
Excellent.
Jinkies. All right. Ethan Ireland.
Yes.
What are you recommending? What's a movie everyone should see?
Oh, I think everybody of all ages should see the movie, the 1979 movie Alien. Especially the younger the kids, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alien is all honestly, I think one of the single best science fiction and single best horror films individually in each genre, as well as a sci-fi horror film combined genre. It comes the closest to being one of the most perfect films ever made, simply from production design standpoint, writing, level of anxiety and fear. It just everything that's followed it has really tried to copy that model that it created. And there's a whole interesting, deep subculture, but interesting, deep analysis of how that movie came to be in the first place. And in a lot of ways, it's a dark reflection of Star Wars.
I really like the story about how they had to airbrush Sigourney Weaver's pubes out of the movie because she refused to shave after she saw the underwear they gave her. She
What
was
is
like,
with
nope.
actors refusing to shave? I don't understand.
It's probably
I thought like Jonathan Frakes.
I was just thinking Jonathan Frakes. Though he does get centrally shaved in Star Trek Insurrection, as we know.
He forgot to mention that it's also a certified cause of cinemania. So
that would do it.
You're talking about her in her underwear? Because I agree.
I mean, that too.
Well, that thing about
classy here
airbrushing
in
it was a
Reels.
joke. That was actually just that was a hoax that was going around as a joke. I didn't think that was actually a thing.
Have you seen the stage production of it that the high school puts on?
Oh,
I've heard of it. I want to see
You
it.
need to watch that on YouTube. Everyone watch that on YouTube. But right now we're going to go to last, but certainly not least, Andy Slack for his recommendation.
Oh no.
Well, being British, I am, of course, a gigantic fan of Doctor Who. And there's just been a Blu-ray remastered re-release of the 1966 cinema film, not TV film, of Doctor Who that they made with Peter Cushing. This is right after the first season had become a big hit, and they didn't know that it would go on for 60 more years, and none of the continuity had been established yet. They just thought, this is big with the kids, we're going to turn it into a film right quick. They managed to rope in Peter Cushing. He does a remarkable job. He's very avuncular, and he's actually called Doctor Who in the film. They get that completely wrong. As any fan knows, the name of the character is just the Doctor. But it's a wild Technicolor ride into 1960s British sci-fi spectacularness. And it's a lot of fun, and it's well worth looking into because it's just a lot less turgid than watching the show, which had far too many episodes for the story they were trying to tell at the time. It's cut down, it's lean and mean. Peter Cushing is great. Go check it out.
Are there Daleks?
There are Daleks.
Oh, well,
in
then
it,
I meant
yes.
just say Daleks. Just say
what the hell's a Dalek?
It's the little
Brother
robots.
Andy.
Exterminate. They're the,
Exterminate.
they're like the only cool thing.
They're not robots. They're mutants inside of a shell.
Yes,
Brother
they're
Andy,
like the only cool thing.
if I could just clarify for a second something you said, Brother Andy, you said something about like this is before they established the continuity. What the hell continuity are you referring
This
to?
is before they established that the Doctor is an alien. It's before they established that he
We can't go
regenerates.
into everything
all of
wrong
that
with
stuff.
Doctor Who. We'd be here all day. I want to hear from Ryan Luis Rodriguez for his recommendation.
Welcome to our new podcast about Doctor Who.
My recommendation this week is yet another documentary, 1955's On the Bowery, directed by Lionel Rogosin. It's a slice of life in New York's Bowery, which is essentially the city's Skid Row. And Rogosin introduced himself into the community and was granted rare access, even if he had to hide his camera in boxes. It's tremendously heartbreaking and empathy enhancing, and it does all of this without forgetting that film is a cinematic experience. I've never been to New York, sad to say. The city would probably eat me alive. But instead of listening to the voices in my head, I could just listen to the city that really should sleep. But that's beyond anything else. It's just one of those small films that you kick yourself for every opportunity you squander the chance to see it. And it's 65 minutes long. Don't hurt nothing. On the Bowery is currently streaming on the Criterion Channel and Canopy. Support your local library.
Will it enhance
Oh,
Schlender's
wow.
empathy?
Oh, I doubt it very much.
You're
That
right.
ship
Enhance has to mean something that
sailed.
there's there to start with, right?
Big Ben.
Big Ben, what did you get? What's your recommendation? What's the movie everyone should see? Shut up. I don't know.
At the time of this recording, Longlegs was kind of the thing people were talking about for horror. I saw it based on the reviews and was tremendously underwhelmed.
Ooh.
I went to the film Oddity instead for the same reason, and it had much more limited screens, and it was much, much better. Horror often does well with lower budgets. One of the keys to making an effective one is to learn how to use set pieces in your writing and filmmaking to remind audiences that those pieces exist, but they don't know when that trap is going to snap, and they just continually wait throughout the entire film. Oddity does that very well. It also effectively works as a thriller where we'll sit in these deliberately paced scenes, wondering what each character knows in that moment. There were one or two moments that I wish were a tad more subdued, but for the amount of moments that were truly great, I can forgive them going over the top here and there. Oddity, I think it's on Shudder. I think it's produced by them, so check it out.
Awesome.
All right.
Great. Schlenzer, what do you got?
Well, Maynard, you gotta go.
Yeah, but I talked the whole time, so I'll be last.
Okay, well, short movies are a type of movie, and there are a few things I love more than ambitious animated shorts. So here is 1989's Oscar-winning animated short, Balance. I could describe it, but it would just basically be the whole movie. Suffice it to say, it is a surreal and somewhat disquieting stop-motion feature that has a way of sticking with you for years. And it provides enough ideas to let pretentious asses like me and Ethan read far too much into it. So go ahead and watch
don't
it on
leave me
YouTube.
out of that.
All the pretentious assholes are welcome. So go ahead and watch it on YouTube. Support your local library.
God damn it.
You can watch YouTube at your library.
You're right.
It sounds good, but as long as it's not a thinly veiled metaphor for war or something.
It's always that.
But no, it was 89 in Germany, so probably not.
Now, I'll
Industrial
send us on
policy.
home. My recommendation this week is another action film helmed by a blonde bombshell. It's 2024's The Fall Guy, starring Ryan Gosling. Man, it seems that everything Gosling has touched since playing the hero in that Barbie movie has turned to gold. And we'll be looking back at this film as an example of Gosling at full pomp. He plays a former Hollywood stuntman who returns to the field to work on his ex-girlfriend's dream movie, but finds himself in a race against time to locate the film's star, who's gone missing, and unravel the dark conspiracy behind the disappearance. Director David Leitch, is that right, Ryan?
Yep.
Lech.
Yeah.
Lech.
Yeah, that's right.
Of Bullet.
Even better.
It is Leitch. Was I right?
Lech.
Of Bullet Train fame, who has a history of both stunt performance and coordination himself, is completely in his element here, framing Gosling's action hero antics as a result of his experience in so many cinematic simulations of danger. Though this film lacks a bit of the bite and style of its predecessor, despite the return of Aaron Taylor Johnson, my second favorite ATJ in Hollywood, there was still certainly worth Ryan's time. And it's worth yours too. I especially appreciated the very apropos behind-the-scenes footage included in the credits that shows the effort and work of the real stuntmen involved in this project. As of this recording, and likely for a long time after, there's no Academy Award category for stunt work, a topic that the film is happy to broach. And I think it raises a cromulent point. Why is there no award dedicated to this clearly specific and highly skilled work? I think we could see something like that created in the next few years, and we'll look back and credit projects like this as the forerunners. Of course, logistically, it'll need to be presented to entire stunt teams rather than individual stuntmen, and of course, it'll get buried as part of the technical awards, but still, it's the thought that counts. Hopefully, we can finally get a posthumous Lifetime Achievement Award for Dar Robinson, who, to tie it all together, provided stunts for Lethal Weapon. He plunged to his death in 1986, filming the movie $1 Million Mystery. And on that happy point, we're all out of time. But we got to thank the entire Cinemania Society for joining us. Dylan's going to thank all of them.
Yeah,
The sexual core.
we're going to thank
Can you remember all their names?
We got Andrea, Zacharia, Ethan, Andy,
You're
Daniel.
That's everyone.
And that's all of them.
Well, that's the sexual core. That's the
Thanks very
sexual
much,
core.
folks.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you guys back. Andrew's going to come back. We already said to
Cutthroat Eye.
going to defend Cutthroat
I
Eye.
love it.
It's always a pleasure.
All
And
right.
we hope everyone else will join us then too, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
Argyle.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.